They were also able to demonstrate effective leadership by sending themselves off as what was known as representatives on mission to warring parts of the country to be essentially a mini central executive branch, while certain conflicts were attempted to be solved, and they could demonstrate their own capacity for leadership and be extremely decisive in their actions. And this proved very effective much of the time with certain representatives, such as Saint-Just, one of Robespierre's colleagues and friends, who went to the Alsace region and essentially quelled the majority of all what was previously a very unquiet province, potentially on the verge of rebellion, and with a very small minimum of bloodshed and effective leadership was able to curtail almost all rebellion within this little province. And this was these were just a few of the many things that the Committee of Public Safety was able to do and to implement their own centralized style of leadership, as well as increasing, of course, the level of the terror. The country was declared in September of 1793, I believe, revolutionary until the peace, or something such wording as that. Basically, until they were able to win more victories on the battlefield, and until they were able to establish peace at home, which they were attempting to do through all of these various measures. And I should also note that it's sort of absurd also to accuse Robespierre of being a dictator, seeing as how he at no point held one singular office. He was never president of anything. And he held no perpetual office whatsoever. He was on a committee with 11 other individuals, and he had bitter enemies who would fight against him. Oftentimes, he was surely the most persuasive and the most gifted orator, and obviously that played a factor in his ascendancy and popularity or early popularity amongst many members of the convention and in the Paris populace. But at no point was he anything resembling a one-man dictatorship. He didn't have the means to be. He had too many enemies, and he had to fight bitterly against his own foes in the convention and even on the Committee of Public Safety. And of course, the committee itself, I don't think many people are aware of this. Its dictatorship, which it did exercise dictatorial power, but was not a self-perpetuating dictatorship. Its power was only effective insofar as the convention continued to administer it. Once a month, a member or a couple members of the committee would have to, because these, who of course were all simultaneously members of the convention, they would have to present themselves to the convention and give a speech in defense of their accomplishments, in defense of their achievements and their accolades and everything that they had done to secure peace or to further the revolution and make the terror effective. And they were essentially held very accountable and only narrowly retained their own office several times. If the convention deemed that the activities of the committee were becoming too dictatorial or too incompetent, then like the Girondins, they would have themselves been removed from power, and their power would have been discontinued. But this didn't happen at all within the approximately 1 year length of the committee, and this in itself demonstrates the confidence that the entire convention, many of whom were enemies of Robespierre, this demonstrates the confidence of the whole convention elected on behalf of the whole of Paris within this 12-man party, of which Robespierre was undoubtedly a vital component. But that's sort of a dictatorship fallacy I'd like to squash. In addition to that, the idea of Robespierre being the originator of the terror. He simply had to understood what circumstances were and had to do he did the best he could within them. That was what he did. The revolution certainly transformed him into a hardened, more ardent politician, but at no point was Robespierre ever in a position to be a perpetual dictator. His power was purely rested on the strength of his own accomplishments, which were manifested to the convention approximately once a month, which is up with his other colleagues. So I think it's important to distinguish a lot of those reoccurring fallacies regarding Robespierre, as well as the events of the Terror itself. Now, of course, there were severe miscarriages of justice throughout the Revolution, particularly within the Terror, and there were unpardonable atrocities that were committed. But the ironic thing is that for almost exclusively every one of these miscarriages of justice and these outrageous atrocities, all of these were carried out by men who were the sworn enemies of Robespierre and his own faction. If you might be familiar with the ardent terrorists, men who could legitimately be called terrorists to some extent, like Collot and Fouché in the city of Lyon, while they were representatives on mission. You could see a slightly different example of representatives on mission as opposed to Saint-Just in Alsace. Carried out massive and completely despicable drownings and just mass shootings of women and children, as well as purely innocent people, to an extremely disgusting, superfluous degree. And there were evidences of this happening elsewhere in Bordeaux with one, I believe his name was Jean Lambert Tallien or something to that effect. He was responsible for many other despicable atrocities in that city that were completely uncalled for. But if you'll notice, during this time frame, Robespierre, who was still in Paris, had his friend and colleague Couthon write a letter condemning much of these disgusting reprisals which were taking place in certain segments, particularly to those infamous episodes in Lyon, to Collot and Fouché. Collot was a member of the Committee of Public Safety himself, and he was taking great liberties with his power and truly being a dictator and abusing it. And he was reprimanded severely. In fact, his colleague Fouché was the next year recalled to face Robespierre, and it was very likely that he himself would be put to the Revolutionary Tribunal if he couldn't answer for himself and his outrageous actions. And if you'll notice also, around the time of the end of the Terror, the majority of the individuals who were involved in the Thermidorian conspiracy to overthrow Robespierre, all the men behind the plot, men like Collot, Fouché, Tallien, were all the ones who instigated this, were themselves the most violent and disgusting and unaccountable of the revolutionaries, who were in grave danger of being rightly tried and condemned for their unpardonable actions. And these were the men who were in league against Robespierre, in addition to men guilty of financial embezzlement like Barras and Freron in places like Toulon and Marseille. Robespierre was sort of infamous. One of the nicknames, the more accurate nicknames that actually stuck, was the Incorruptible, and he had no time or patience for anyone being anything less than completely transparent, honest, and virtuous in their governmental business. And he was sickened and disgusted by bribery and corruption. And these men themselves had been accused of nefarious financial dealings, and were likely going to be brought to heed.